Hello and welcome to On Point. I'm Naomi Barajas. In the wake of the recent attacks in San Bernardino and Europe, hate crimes against Muslims and Arabs have tripled. A California State University San Bernardino research group analyzed FBI data and found that the rate of attacks has increased to more than 12 suspected hate crimes against Muslims in the U.S. every month. These attacks have prompted politicians to propose that drastic measures be taken to protect the public, including imposing a ban on Syrian refugees. The attacks and the political rhetoric that followed reawakened a fear of Muslims that hasn't been this strong since the terrorist acts of 9/11. Around the world, Muslims have had to stand up and apologize for the actions of extremists, and some say they are tired of saying sorry.
Oh my God, I hope it wasn't a Muslim that did this. That's what's in our mind, in our hearts, every single time. Ask any Muslim anywhere in the world, that's exactly what they'll tell you. I hope it's not somebody else who's claiming to be Muslim. We are actually tired of, every time something happens, having to stand up and condemn, as if we have some share or some responsibility towards that. We absolutely don't.
In the 15 years since 9/11, this atmosphere of blame, fear, and intolerance continues. On Point reporter Errebhi has more.
Thank you, Noemi. I'd like to thank our guests for joining me today. With us is Dr. Nicholas Dungey, a political science professor here at Cal State Northridge, and Edina Lekovic, Director of Policy and Programming at the Muslim Public Affairs Council. Thank you both for joining me today.
Pleasure.
So after seeing that video, why do you think Muslims have to speak up for and defend other Muslims after terrorist attacks? Why do some Americans expect Muslims to apologize and denounce the terrorism?
So in my work, I've been working with an American Muslim advocacy organization for almost 15 years. And what I have seen with one crisis after another is that in the media landscape, one of the only times there's an opportunity for American Muslim voices to be heard is in the aftermath of a terrorist attack or in the aftermath of some awful, tragic news. And unfortunately, what that does is it sets up one of the few opportunities for there to be mainstream Muslim voice, but it's still in the context of bad news. So even though you have that opportunity to condemn, and we certainly condemn over and over again, the frustration, I think, comes at the reality that American Muslims and Muslims around the world have condemned every single terrorist action that has taken place. That doesn't stop them from taking place, and it also, I think it creates a growing internal frustration around, clearly I didn't do it, what do I have to apologize for? Do we ask white males to apologize when other white males get involved in mass shooting sprees? And so there is this imbalance that's there that people are really reacting to. But the truth is, and I think what's important is that just 6% of all terrorist attacks since 1980 have been perpetrated by somebody who claims to be a Muslim. Most of the terrorism that we're seeing around us has all different kinds of people who are behind the acts of violence. And so there's a bigger problem around what's creating these acts of violence and dealing with those root causes, rather than just fixating on, does this community have special knowledge? Are they harboring, terrorists, or all the kinds of fear-based and suspicion-based statements and thoughts that are out there?
Mm-hmm. I think she's absolutely correct in the sense that I don't think it's appropriate to ask a religion or a group of people or a race of people ever to apologize for the acts of individual people, and especially people who act under the cover of certain philosophical or religious or political doctrines. It's an emotional reaction. I think that people demand that. Now, I think what Edina said is very important, and I think some of the emotional reaction is generated by the fact that these are extraordinarily difficult times, and that there is an extraordinary amount of economic and political anxiety in this country. And you see this at heightened states of political insecurity, whether it's economic insecurity, whether it's political security reacting to acts like terrorism. And I think some of the heightened emotional drama is driven by the fact that we are entering a phase where the social contract as we've known it, is kind of coming apart. And as it comes apart, people look for people to blame. I don't mean to minimize it by saying it's normal, but these are the emotional and psychological things that drive people.
And how did the terrorist attacks in Europe increase discrimination or hatred against immigrants from war-torn zones?
Well, it's very clear how it has done that. In fact, there's just a new report that was released by Georgetown University by their Bridge Initiative about the level of violence against Muslims that has taken place, particularly during this election season. And there have been something like 180 either acts of hate or violent hatred or threats of violence that have taken place all around the country in just the span of less than the last year. And so when we think about that, that is a rise from the previous year. And we know that during election seasons is particularly when issues of faith, issues of immigration, issues of economic disparity, the haves and the have-nots, all of these issues become political wedge issues meant to sway voters. And so it is, sadly, it's a difficult time to be an American Muslim. While we are among the most well-integrated, there's a Pew study that found that American Muslims are middle class, mainstream, and moderate. It was all in the headline. We're very average, normal people who are looking for a piece of the American dream just like everybody else. And we're also looking at this political season as one where we are easily made targets, and other communities of color are also made targets during heated discussions. And people like Donald Trump and Ted Cruz, but not just them, also others out there. I should say I feel less afraid of Donald Trump than I do all those people in the stands who fill those rallies and cheer when he says the hateful things that he does against so many different groups of people. And that, I think, is a signal of why hate speech is so dangerous. Is it starts the slippery slope, right? People don't become violent bigots overnight. It starts with speech. It starts with these things that roll out into the next wave and that doesn't just endanger Muslims. It endangers all Americans. And as Nick said, it's just a repeat in history, right? Many different groups have been targeted over time, and that's a reality that we're facing. I think the good news is that we get far more support than we do attacks in the wake of San Bernardino or Brussels. Every mosque leader that I have talked to, not just here but all around the country, has said like 10 to 1 they've gotten positive messages of support for every negative thing that has happened. But just like people are afraid of that, 0.00006% of Muslims who might be connected to ISIS or other kinds of groups, so too I think when I see in the Muslim community is people are afraid of that, the random person who might just be unhinged, right? They're not afraid of America at large. They're afraid of those isolated individuals who might be drinking the Kool-Aid.
I think this is a wonderful opportunity to put this discussion in a deeper historical and philosophical context. And I think it's really important that people really remember, Americans and everybody else, that, first of all, democracies are dangerous. Democracies are pluralistic communities, which means that they are communities built up by all sorts of people who have radically and fundamentally different ideas of what the good life looks like. Mm-hmm. That's pluralism. And so in highly pluralistic, highly active, informationally based communities, you're going to have a lot of exchange. Yeah. And some of that exchange from time to time, and personally I think this is a great thing. I think this is a good thing. But some of that exchange from time to time is going to be pretty intense, rather intense, even hurtful in some ways. Of course, I'm not condoning that, but I think it's really important that people remember that liberal democracies are dangerous by their nature. And not only that, but I think it's really important that people remember, and I think we've lost sight of it generally as a culture, and I think it's an extraordinarily dangerous thing. Tolerance is a very difficult thing. We have been seduced lately in the last several generations of American culture, broad culture, in thinking that tolerance is an easy thing, that all you have to do is just simply love people. And again, I think that's something we should promote. But the origins of this country were born out of an extraordinary pain and suffering caused by intolerance. And tolerance is something that you have to work for, that you have to sort of keep as a project alive in your mind. And it's, it's not an automatic or an easy thing.
Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump recently expressed his concern about radical Islam and immigration during one of his speeches. Let's take a look at the video.
We must stop importing extremism through senseless immigration policies. We have no idea where these people are coming from. There's no documentation. There's no paperwork. There's nothing. We have to be smart. We have to be vigilant. A pause for reassessment will help us to prevent the next San Bernardino, or, frankly, much worse. All you have to do is look at the World Trade Center and September 11th.
Let's talk about political rhetoric, the power of words in the presidential candidate's speeches. What effect do you think this is having on people, whether it's Arab Americans, Muslims, or just all voters in general?
It reminds me of I think something that President John F. Kennedy said about if you repeat a lie often enough, it starts to look like the truth. And I think that's what's on display here. We're seeing that come to life every single day. Donald Trump and Ted Cruz specifically, but again, other candidates have certainly done that. Most of them are out of the race by now, have repeated the same lies over and over again. These lies about extremism, about how immigrants are a threat, how there's no documentation or paperwork. That's just an outright lie. I mean, anybody who's seeking to become a refugee in the United States goes through 2 years of scrutiny on every last detail of their record, and so many people are applying that just a tiny percentage makes it through the vetting process, because the U.S. is only accepting something like 15 or 20,000, and that's been an increase from the 10,000 that we were accepting before this. So when you compare that to the millions that Turkey or Jordan or Germany have taken, we are very stringent. But again, going back to in political seasons, if people feel fear and they feel suspicion, they feel their way of life being threatened because they can't get access to jobs, they can't, they're not getting their own piece of the American dream, then it becomes a question of who's robbing me of my American dream, right? And so this idea of shutting down the borders, this idea of not allowing immigrants to come in, this idea of changing who we are as a country becomes a way of securing our piece of the American dream. But we can't exchange our piece of the American dream for America at large, for the Constitution, for the principles that our country was built on. My family's from the former Yugoslavia, from the Balkans, a zone that saw its own awful inter-community, interfaith conflict. My parents came here because they wanted free educational access, upward mobility for their children, and they wanted religious freedom that they didn't experience in their own homeland. So they looked for a new home that was rooted in those things. And that's what America, that's the America that I was raised in, and that I think is so crucially important that we remember during election seasons like this, because the voices of hate want us to believe that we are so different. But fundamentally, we all want the same things, and we don't have to take things away from other people in order to get those things.
Do you think Daesh represents Islam? And why do you think, or why does the media insist on calling Daesh the Islamic State or ISIS? Do they represent Islam?
Daesh or ISIS represent a death cult that is wrapped in the cloak of Islam. ISIS is anti-Islam. What their ideology of hate, of rape, of slavery, of murder, of you name it, these are all betrayals of the values that are taught in the Quran, which is our scripture as Muslims. They are violating from the very basic principle that the Quran teaches, that if you take one innocent life, it's as if you have taken the lives of all of humanity. Just imagine the levels of genocide that ISIS has done just in this period of time. So ISIS is a threat to Islam. It is a threat to Muslims. 90% of ISIS's victims have been Muslims around the world, and we are feeling a small piece of that here, in the United States when there are things that take place around the Western world. Why do people insist on calling it Islamic State? Because they call themselves Islamic State. And some world leaders have chosen to use Daesh instead because it's the Arabic acronym for the same name. And in Arabic, Daesh means chaos. And so it is both a verbal insult and a way of stripping them of their self-styled Islamic credibility. Every time we call them Islamic State, we make them sound Islamic, when the last thing they are is Islamic. They are anti-Islamic. So hopefully that's a direct answer to your question.
Thank you. Our reporters asked some CSUN students if they feel Arabs and Muslims should be monitored. Let's take a look at the video.
No.
Okay, why not?
I just feel like, that's an invasion of privacy. Like, that's their religion, and just like how our constitution's like, we need to separate religion and state and everything like that. So there's really no need.
It's an invasion of like their personal life, and I just don't think that's necessary.
I don't think we should, I feel like that's racism. I feel like that's discrimination.
We shouldn't be scared of Muslims. We should be scared of Al-Qaeda. We should be scared of the extreme group of Muslims who are giving the Muslims a bad name. They're the ones who are doing these attacks. They're the ones who are making us feel unsafe.
No, just because it's so stupid.
That's just basically putting one religion or one type of people on, a security basis, but this is America and it's supposed to be the land of the free. So that's just ridiculous.
There's a lot of generalization and discrimination already against Arabs and Muslims and even Sikhs. What motivates the attackers? Does political rhetoric encourage these crimes?
Well, responding to something Edina said earlier, again, perhaps my role here is bringing things back into a broader historical and political context, especially in terms of contemporary American politics and its roots in liberal political philosophy. Liberalism, as a way of organizing human beings into political order, it's a kind of a strategy. It's not a solution. Right? Liberalism and liberal democratic politics are ways of sort of identifying and recognizing that people have fundamentally different views of things. And people have very deep and profound, and in many cases sincere, disagreements about what things are, about what Islam is, what Christianity is. I mean, for goodness sake, for 500 years in the European West, Catholics and Protestants had this extraordinarily vicious political debate about what it meant to believe in God in this way. And so this is the nature of believing in truth. Whether you call it God or Plato's pure ideas, this is the nature of it. People are going to have fundamentally deep and profound disagreements about the highest things, and unless they get a sort of grip over themselves, learn to contain themselves, these disagreements will find expression in violence and in political violence and disagreement. Now, I do want to say one thing, and it's something I mentioned earlier. In some ways, I want to play the devil's advocate here and say, because I really do believe that democracies are kind of dangerous things. They're meant to be unstable. They're meant to be dangerous in a way, in the sense that they must be reinvented. They must be reauthorized all the time, through time and space. And that's why we have elections. That's why we have open public discussions where we allow people to say, at times, even extraordinarily hurtful or ignorant or stupid things. Those sort of things are part of the political process. They are as much a part of the political landscape and the process as anything else. And from a certain point of view, they play, certainly not in the sense that they encourage harm against other people in a physical way, but they play an important role in the democratic discourse because first of all, they remind people who already believe that people ought to be tolerated, treated equally, respected, why they believe those things, why those ideas are important to be fought for and sustained. And they also remind people of what is in the political discourse itself, what is in the community. And I think that there's a very important role for all of that to play.
We asked CSUN students if they feel safe. Let's take a look at the video.
I do feel safe. Like, I have a lot of my friends who are like Muslim and everything like that, so I feel like there's no reason to feel afraid?
I think so. I mean, if anything is going to happen, it can happen anywhere. So, yeah.
If it's a question of safety about Islamic people, then yes. I think there are dangers in just being alive in this area or any area in the world.
I mean, there's about as much a threat of that happening frequently as there is an attack from, I feel like, any other country, any other person, or any other group of people, you know. I mean, there's no sense in living in fear.
I think for me, it's just more of a personal well-being to be cautious about my immediate surroundings, and for that, it doesn't really affect me and what I'm doing.
What do you think of the video?
So I want to say how proud I am that these students are all reacting in ways that are
really enlightened.
That are really open-minded. But I think it's also indicative of where millennials are at when you look at the age demographics in terms of attitudes of accepting people, moving beyond even tolerance and moving into a place of just embracing and valuing difference and valuing diversity. The millennial generation is at the top of those curves, right? And at the same time, I think that this question of safety, look, we're all concerned about safety, and that's something that I react to, is that it's not a Muslim thing, a white thing, a black thing, a Latino thing. Exactly. And
it's an existential concern.
And at this stage in our reality as a country, it's an American thing. There are mass shootings taking place on an average of a daily basis in our country. And so to focus just on terrorism perpetrated by one group of people misses the point. And I think that we all are concerned about safety, because you don't know if you're in a classroom or in a mall or in a movie theater, whether you could be a target of random violence, because it's really just random. But as I think one of those students said, we have a choice to make about whether we choose to be safe or not. People who choose to feel safe and secure. People who feel fear and who tend to be the ones who make poor decisions, because when you are fearful, your heart pounds, right? The blood is in your heart rather than in your head. And so decisions are made by the gut, and those decisions often result in somebody being anti-Muslim but targeting somebody who's Sikh instead. Sikh Americans who are a different faith entirely but are known for men who wear turbans have been killed and targeted with anti-Muslim violence on a regular basis.
Just recently.
And that says something about hate, fear, stupidity, all kind of being lined up, and causing and being kind of behind some of the violence that we see.
Well, again, I now know what my role is here. Again, just to remind the audience or people listening, and again, forgive me for being rather dramatic here, but the origins of liberal political philosophy and the sort of state that was constructed in the U.S. Constitution and was sustained through much effort the last 200 years, it's born out of fear. There are two emotional conditions that create the social contract, and one is fear and economic desire, a desire for economic opportunity. So politics, as we understand it and as we've constructed it, is an attempt to kind of ameliorate that fear, to kind of control it, not control it, but at least contain it. Now, existentially, it's something that can never be fully controlled, right? So whenever you have episodes of economic insecurity, whenever you have situations like now, we are entering an entirely new economic and political paradigm. What is happening right now and what will unfold in the next 10 years is the most extraordinary transformation in human society, information, biological, economic and political society in the last 500 years. Only the Renaissance even comes close to matching it. And people are beginning to understand that on multiple levels of their life, their economic life, their political life, what's the neighborhood look like now, what's the country look like, and they are sort of existentially reacting to very, very powerful forces they have some idea about, but they don't fully understand. And you're seeing in this sort of episodic expression of this rhetoric and this willingness or capacity to assign blame.
Thank you so much. That's all the time we have for today. I'd like to thank our guests for joining us. Thank you both so much.
It's a pleasure.
Thanks for having me.
When I was in foster care, I never knew when I would have to move, so I always had my suitcase ready to go. Then one day I was adopted. My new parents opened their hearts and home to me. My parents cook my favorite breakfast for me every morning. My parents take me on trips I never thought I would go on. They gave me a home and an even better reason to use that suitcase. My parents aren't perfect, but they're perfect for me.
So, same time next week?
Well, of course. Put away a few bucks, feel like $1 million. For free tips to help you save, go to Feed the Pig.
There are 16 million children struggling with hunger in America. That's 1 in 5 daughters, sons, neighbors, and classmates who don't know where their next meal is coming from. Yet billions of pounds of good food go to waste every year. It's time we do something about it. Feeding America is a nationwide network of food banks that helps provide meals to millions of kids and families in need. Visit feedingamerica.org to help them feed even more. Together, we can solve hunger. Together, we're feeding America.
Oh, look, a redhead. Staring contest. You still got it. I know.
Come alive with the forest.
The dad was cute.
You were looking right at us.
Visit discovertheforest.org to find a forest near you.
Hey, did you know 2.4 million loving cats and dogs in shelters and rescues need our help to find a home? Let's go to theshelterpetproject.org and meet if you are in a shelter near you. Harlow, oh, she's one great listener who loves to hear all your stories. My kind of cat. Cerulo is a sweet, goofy boy who's eager to please. Sounds just like another dog I know. So go to theshelterpetproject.org, search your local shelters and rescues, and go for a cuddle with your next best friend. Adopt.
You guys going to my party on Friday?
Yeah, dude, it's gonna be crazy.
All right.
What's up, dude? I'm loving your jacket.
Don't be such a fag.
If you don't mean it, why say it? Words hurt. Think before you speak.
A single ember that escapes from a wildfire can travel more than a mile. You can't control where that ember will land, only what happens when it does. Get Fire Adapted now at fireadapted.org.
Thank you for watching On Point. You can follow us on Facebook and Twitter at CSUN On Point. You can watch us on LA 36 on Sunday mornings at 11:30, and you can listen to us on KCSN 88.5 FM also on Sunday mornings at 5:30. For all of us here at On Point, I'm Nami Barajas.